Hi, it's Amanda again. um, this video is about what recovery can look like. Recovery can look very different for every individual. It can look like inpatient. It can look like doing it on your own. It can look like intensive outpatient. It can be outpatient. It can be medically managed. It can be going to support groups, different types of support groups to go to. It can be religious, it can be interspiritual, it can be interpersonal. It looks different for everyone, and that is okay, as it doesn't matter what it looks like. What matters is the recovery part, and that it is successful and long term. And so, we're going to dive in to what each one looks like. When it comes to inpatient, we're going to look at how long inpatient generally lasts and the steps to go through inpatient. So, generally, when you want to go to inpatient, if you have state insurance, which most individuals with substance abuse who are low income, which is the field that I was working with, they have state insurance. I'm from Washington State, so they have Medicaid from Washington State. And what that looks like is they come into the clinic, they ask for help. Generally, if they're actively using, inpatient requires the assessment, and then once the assessment's done and says they need to go to inpatient before getting out and going to intensive outpatient, they need to go and do 2, 3, 4 days, depending on the substance, either in the crisis center, which is just a monitored secure place for you to detox, the detox center, or what it could look like if you're on benzos, or alcohol, in extreme amounts of alcohol, then it could look like being in the hospital for a few days and being monitored there, because the only two substances that we will send you to the hospital for is alcohol and benzos. And the reason why is because withdrawing from those will kill you if it is in extreme levels of alcohol and some benzos, like, and the amounts that you're using. It will kill you. It can kill you withdrawing from them. So they need to medically monitor you. And that's why we send you to a hospital. It is not saying that you can't do it. It is saying that we want to make sure you are safe and that you will be taken care of if you are not safe in that moment where your heart starts having complications, or your liver starts having complications, or your lungs start having complications because your body can't handle going through the withdrawal of those benzos or that alcohol, because you've lived in such a high tolerance for so long, because it is a disease. Your body is reacting without it in a very negative way. So, those are ways. And what inpatient is, it is a secure location where they can medically manage you with either Suboxone or Vivitrol, which are some options for antagonists that if you use a substance, you will not get high on those substances. It keeps you from being able to get high. I think methadone isn't generally used anymore in inpatient. I know you can still get methadone over in an outpatient setting, but it's not commonly used anymore. It's just because Suboxone is taken over for methadone because it's less addictive and works slightly better with its side effects. It has less side effects, and I think like if you use a whole bunch of it, you won't get as high, or you won't have that reaction of high like you will if you use too much methadone. So they don't use methadone as much. But inpatient is usually a 30 to 60 day stay at a facility where you get a bed, sometimes a shared room. Most of the time it's not, but sometimes it is. And you get fed, and you get monitored, and you get counseling, and you get groups, and you get talked to like a child and treated like a child, because most people revert back mentally to when they were a child because they don't feel good and they feel sick because they're withdrawing and they're trying to learn new things to think about and new things to do with their hands and their thoughts, because all they've done for the last umpteen years is think and do drugs. Again, it's a disease. We got to look at it that way. So they're trying to find a new way to work their brain and their body out of this disease and into a more stable, healthy environment. So that is what it is. It is a controlled environment to help them get clean. And so they are very serious about keeping it a clean environment. So they will, when you get there, they will look through your stuff. They will take your phone. They will take things that they don't deem appropriate. You have the right to bring your own pillow and your own blanket and some things, but like anything with a camera, not allowed. Recordings, not allowed. Recorders, not allowed. There's a huge list of things that are not allowed and or provided if you don't bring it, which is perfectly fine. If you don't have it, you don't have to bring it. Like, if they have a suggestion list that counselors give you when you decide that you want to go to inpatient, and if you don't have things on that list, it's not saying that you have to bring them. It's saying that if you have these things and you want to bring them, you can. But it's not a requirement. And it's also not a shame game if you don't have them. It's a suggestion, again. But there's also a don't bring list. And that is a firm don't bring list. Because if you do bring it, it's going to sit in their office until you leave and check out and get picked up. And either you get picked up by a staff member, the counselor, or a staff member at the office that you originally did your assessment. And so that way you can then go in, update your assessment with your counselor, and make a plan of action for recovery groups. They can help you find your recovery groups outside. They can help you find or get you a list for housing if you need it. They can help you with getting you started with your intensive outpatient, because once you come out of inpatient, you go into intensive outpatient. What that looks like is 3 days a week. You come in for groups and you spend one day with your counselor for an hour, and you take pee tests whenever we decide to randomly pee test you, because we need to verify that you are not using. So sometimes it's twice a week, sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's once every 2 weeks. It is varying. And sometimes, most of the time, I always told them and warned my clients that I was going to do a pee test after every holiday. Right before and after holidays, I always do a pee test, because holidays suck. Holidays are triggers, and they're trigger days, and you don't want to go a holiday without getting a piss test. Because if you don't have that accountability, then what are you doing in services? Like, that's what services are for. It is your conscience. It is accountability. That's all we are here for, is just to be that accountability for you. We're here to give you resources, be someone who is positive, and to talk to you, and to provide you that healthy environment that you may not have on the outside. But most of all, we are accountability. We are your conscience speaking to you. And we give you different techniques of coping skills. That is what we work on, because that is huge. That is something you will need to work on in recovery, is coping skills and identifying your triggers. But that is for a later video. But if you like this and you like the topics that I'm bringing up for this playlist, please subscribe and like this video. Let's talk about medical management. Oh no, we already did that. Oh no. It's okay. We'll talk about it anyway. Medical management. Now, there's a few different ways to do medical management. One is through a clinic. There's a few clinics here in Washington that have, the ability to do medical management through the actual counseling office. And then there are some clinics that are specially designed for just doing medical management, like Ideal Options. They do just the medical management part. They'll give you your Vivitrol shot, they'll give you the Suboxone, they'll do the methadone stuff, and they'll do the P-test and blood work and all of that, but that's all they do. They don't do counseling, they don't do groups, they don't do services like that. That is all they do. And that's what that looks like. Well, intensive outpatient. Intensive outpatient lasts about 8 months. It can go 6 months, but it usually lasts about 8 months. It's a long process because you have 3 groups. You have to go through all of the groups. There is no cutting lines. And the reason why is because the groups identify different subjects. One group is for learning what drugs do to your body and to your brain, and identifying how they affect people differently, how they affect people with mental illness, and how they affect people who are neurotypical, and how they affect your body differently, because some addicts may look like they're an addict, and some people may not look like they're an addict because their body hasn't caught up to them yet with the fact that they've been abusing it for years. It all depends. And then there's another group, and it is more focused on, support in your group. Like, that group, you do a lot of more engaging in each other and talking about your week and talking about triggers that might have come up or times that you did relapse during the week, because recovery isn't always 100% in the beginning. And when you're in therapy, you don't always have to be 100%. Depending on the external motivators, they may not be 100% in recovery during services. So, you have to keep that in mind. There may be individuals in this group, in intensive outpatient, who are still actively using, but reducing their use. And there may be people who can't use due to external motivators in the very same group, but they all can identify and talk about and learn about their triggers, and learn about coping skills, and learn about how they can live in society without substance. And it is a long process of learning, which is why intensive outpatient is such a long process. And that is okay. It is all right for it to be a long process. No one says it has to be a short-term solution, because if it was short-term, then how is recovery going to last long if you only are in therapy for a few weeks? How would that work? It wouldn't. People would be relapsing left and right if they didn't get long-term resources. Well, then you have to look at the fact that with that, that's two groups. Your third group is a different type of education group, and that one focuses on working towards the resources that are in your community for those in recovery and also just in general. And that one usually transitions into the different things that you can do as an individual and what likes and dislikes, and starts working towards what are you moving towards now that you're in recovery. What are you working towards trying to get into recovery? It is a looking towards the future group. And that is an important group too, because those in addiction only see their drug. And that is the next thing they're looking for. And that is the next thing they're looking for is their drug. And they're so closed off from reality is that they're only looking for their drug. That's all they can think about and do. And they don't look to the future. They don't look forward. So that group teaches them that they can move forward, that they can look forward, that they can look forward to something, that they can achieve something in the future, making goals, goal making. And that is huge for someone who's never done it before, who didn't know that they could achieve goals. I had clients that made goals for going to college, graduating, becoming a substance abuse counselor, and I have clients that have succeeded in that. And it feels amazing that I had a client who did. And I have clients who succeeded in getting their children back because of recovery. And I mean, I have clients from every aspect where they learned that they could make goals, learned how to make goals, and actually achieve their goals because of their recovery, because of that group alone. And that is a huge accomplishment. It may be normalcy for those not in addiction and in general society. For those who don't know that that is something that they didn't learn or don't know because they burned too many brain cells, whatever you want to say. But it's a fact. People in addiction don't know how to set goals and then achieve them. And that group really does make a difference for those who are struggling. And then you got to talk about and think about different what recovery looks like with groups, like support groups, because support groups in society is very, very important, because when it comes to the counseling side, we are only with the client probably 1 to 5% of the time. If you're an intensive outpatient or in continued services, which is only once a week seeing the counselor in group, and then only having once a month meetings with them in the extended program, and that's voluntary. That's not even the required part. That's after a year of recovery. And that's only people who are struggling with thoughts or triggers. We only spend very little time with them. And there's a lot of time where they're out in society and they need to be strong on their own. So with that, we want them to have resources for recovery groups out in public. We want them to get a sponsor. We want them to have external support systems outside of us. We want them to have us, but we also want them to have other people too, because that is very, very important. If all they have are addicts outside, then how are they going to be clean? How are they going to be successful in getting recovery if all they have are drugs around them? How are they going to see past this drug that is always in their face? How are they going to look towards their future? They can't. So, We have to take them out of this and bring them into this. And what does that look like? Well, recovery groups is a big step. Now, the different recovery groups